Hi everyone, it's meteorologist Brian Bennett. Let's take a look at the tropics right now. We're getting a much better idea of what's going to become of these two storms, where they're going, and what the impacts will be. First of all, we have Hurricane, Category 5 Hurricane Humberto. We have kind of ragged looking tropical depression number 9, but it is starting to get a closed circulation, so it is technically a tropical depression now. Looking at Umberto, a buzzsaw out in the Atlantic Ocean, just spinning with a perfect eye, a kind of small storm. Obviously, it will go through an eye wall replacement cycle. The Coriolis effect will start to pull on it and it will become a bigger storm once it goes farther north. Not often do we not really care about a Category 5 hurricane, but that's the case right now because this one's going to stay offshore. Bermuda will want to keep a close eye on this storm, but for the continental United States, it looks like the storm will stay offshore and it will not impact the islands either. That's it about Humberto, other than the impact that it might have on Imelda. Let's talk about Tropical Depression number 9, which will become Imelda and eventually Hurricane Imelda once it gets up to the northern Florida latitude. Notice this yellow area right here. That means the National Hurricane Center has issued a tropical storm watch for this area, indicating the possibility that Monday morning, Monday afternoon, we could see winds approaching tropical storm strength at the immediate beach locations, which would include anywhere from basically northern Fort Lauderdale to Cocoa Beach to Cape Canaveral, and this will likely be extended farther north as well. Tropical storm force winds are 39 to 73 miles per hour, so that's what the immediate beach locations could possibly see as the storm is scraping the coast. Here's a look at a newer computer model. This is the RRFSA model, and it's basically a newer version of the HRRR model, in case you wanted to know that. And you can see that the storm is expected to gain a more symmetric look. With that said, the storm is going to be top heavy. There's going to be a little bit of wind shear on this storm, so the majority of the rain is going to be on the northern side of this storm, and the drier side will be the southern side. But you can see from the winds and the center of circulation that the storm is going to be pretty close to Florida. Florida is about 120 miles wide right here, and you can see the storm's not far offshore. We're looking at the eye of the storm maybe being 50 or 60 miles offshore of the Cape Canaveral up to Jacksonville area. So it's going to be very close to Florida. No anticipation that it's going to do something crazy and wobble to the left. But with that said, this is almost an unprecedented situation with the Fujiwara effect this close to shore interacting with Hurricane Humberto and this developing storm as well. So really nothing would surprise me about this storm, but that really does not look to be in the cards at this point. But the storm will be close enough to potentially bring some tropical storm force winds to the immediate beach locations. Obviously, the East Coast of Florida is going to have some big waves, rip currents, erosion, and that sort of thing, dealing with the waves pounding the shore. Here is the hurricane reconnaissance aircraft data from early this morning. You can see the storm was just offshore of Cuba. Not a great looking center of circulation yet. That center of circulation can end up kind of honing in farther south or even farther north, but that tiny bit of difference can make the difference in whether the storm makes landfall in South Carolina or whether it stalls well before there and becomes a storm that curves out to sea. Here's a look at the latest hurricane reconnaissance aircraft. We actually have two airplanes in there right now, and you can see that the storm has moved to the northwest a little bit, but still not a real great closed low to see on satellite imagery yet at this point. Here's a look at the European computer model, and I like this model the most out of all the different models I've looked at because I feel like it initializes the best as far as the positioning of where it's supposed to be based on where we see the center of the storm right now from the hurricane reconnaissance data. So going with that, it will pick up on a bit of the southwesterly wind, allowing that storm to be pulled to the north. And then it's going to start to feel some of the impacts of Hurricane Humberto. And right now, it looks like that's going to force the storm to stall. But this is a storm system of inches. But the way these two interact, this is just insane, and could be one of the most difficult forecasts of the year, if not of the last couple of years. This is an insane storm to try to forecast with all these different players in the loop, especially the offshore hurricane. But right now, it's looking like Umberto is actually going to force TD9, which will be Hurricane Imelda, to stall, maybe about 80 miles offshore of South Carolina or so. It is still in the cards, or still feasible, that the storm could make its way to the actual coastline. But right now, it's looking like it's going to curve before it does so. But that's all plays out on how these storms interact with each other. Then it looks like Umberto is gonna peace out. See you later, man. It's gonna stall the storm. At that point, I think it considers its job done, and therefore Umberto's like, all right, I'm going out to sea, and it leaves Imelda just kind of hanging here, like, where are you going, man? Why are you leaving me? Well, Imelda then, according to the European, says, well, all right, well, if he's going to leave me, I'm going to dart back into North Carolina. At this point, it would be experiencing some wind shear, so likely the storm wouldn't have much intensity. But just so you know, the European and the AI model are forecasting that as a possibility, that the storm could stall, hang out for a little bit, and then move to the north. That's a possibility that we'll keep a close eye on right now. I wouldn't say it's one of the likelier scenarios, but it is a possible scenario that we'll want to watch in the long run. This is a look at the 51-member European ensemble, showing 51 different possible outputs or possibilities from this storm. And as you can see, the storms that develop closer to Cuba, kind of like what we have now, are the ones that are more likely to stall earlier and start to curve out to sea. The storms that get a more of a northerly jump start before Umberto can impart its influence are the storms that are the ones more likely to make landfall in the Carolinas. Right now, I think the most likely scenario will be for it to be pretty close to the center of this group here, if not a little bit on the northern side of the group, which means a very close stall to landfall, but not an actual movement on shore. But that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. And then the majority of the members do take it out to sea. Do we have any dry air that's going to kill this storm? There is a little bit of dry air in the area, but doesn't look like it's going to kill the storm. It may limit development a little bit, but it's not going to kill the storm. What about wind shear? We do have a little bit of wind shear being imparted on this storm. It will provide a bit of a steering current pushing the storm to the north, and it will limit the development. So I don't anticipate a rapidly intensifying storm into some major Cat 5 hurricane, but it will be allowed to intensify at least into a Cat 1. It does have a feasible ceiling of a Cat 2 or at very, very highest a Cat 3, but that's kind of unlikely. Right now, we're looking at more likely a Cat 1 hurricane and more than likely stalling off the coast of South Carolina. With that being said, we can start to look at the impacts based on what we expect to happen at this point, which would be the hurricane stalling just offshore. With that said, this storm is going to be very top heavy. The heaviest rain is going to be north of the center due to the wind shear, due to the warm air advection, and a few other features, which means the rain will be falling in the Carolinas even if we don't get a landfall. So here's the rainfall outlook, looking for the possibility of 8, 9, 10 inches of rain in the immediate coastal locations. Heading inland, much less rain, assuming the storm doesn't make landfall. If the storm stalls a little bit earlier, obviously these rainfall totals would be much lower. But right now, the potential does exist for some pretty significant coastal rains. One thing we need to look at, we're near the anniversary of Hurricane Helene. Helene brought torrential rain to the mountainous areas. Obviously, when a lot of rain falls into a small watershed, that's going to send the rain flash flooding down the mountains and causing quite a bit of devastation. Thankfully, I guess in this case, the South Carolina and North Carolina coastline is very flat. It's a flat area, so we wouldn't be looking at as much of a flash flooding type of situation. A flooding possibility, yes, will exist in coastal Carolinas, but not a flash flooding scenario where we go from basically empty rivers to rivers exceeding their banks and washing away homes and that type of thing, like we saw with Helene. All right, that is rain. What about wind? Here's the wind forecast, and you can see the coastal areas could see winds that are around 35 to 50 miles per hour based on the expected stalling of the storm. If the storm does make it a little bit farther north, then we could see those winds approaching 70, 80 miles per hour at the coast. And obviously, if the storm turns a little bit sooner, then these winds would even be a bit more light. But right now, based on the current stopping location of the storm offshore, I would expect winds to be maxing out around 40, 50, maybe 60 miles per hour at the immediate coastlines, and then winds not being much of a concern as you head farther inland. One thing that I haven't heard too many people talk about is the fact that we have two storms pushing on the water. We have Humberto right here. It rotates counterclockwise, as all tropical systems do in the northern hemisphere. You're going to see the winds blowing from the east to the west right here, pushing on the water. Then it gets picked up by another storm, by Imelda, and that is going to push on the storm or push on the water from east to west. So basically, this is going to be the equivalent of a massive hurricane. Florida is about 120 miles wide, so you can kind of do the math here. This looks like more like a 600-mile wide hurricane with strong winds. So lots of wind pushing on the water. What does that translate to? Let's take a closer view. You can see just offshore, the European model is forecasting waves to be around 75 feet tall. So not a good area to be in a vessel of any size offshore of the Carolinas when this storm is passing by. Obviously, the waves will get a little bit smaller once they approach the coast, but still we're going to be seeing 10 to 20-foot waves in coastal South Carolina, North Carolina, maybe even Georgia, maybe even northern Florida as well. So rough surf, lots of rip currents, lots of coastal erosion, all of that looking possible with this storm, even if it does not make landfall. Here's a look at the Google DeepMind model in case you wanted to see this real quick. It's been doing a great job with intensity. Right now, the storm is expected to become a Cat 1 hurricane. The majority of the consensus does take the storm offshore. It has it stalling, like I mentioned. I think it'll probably be one of these more far northerly tracks where it turns east or stalls a little bit closer to South Carolina. And I think it'll probably be a little bit closer to Florida as well. I think this is a little bit farther off than we're going to see the storm move. So a little bit closer to Florida and a little bit closer to South Carolina is what I anticipate from this storm. But we still have some more time to look at it. I'll keep you updated as I always do. And hopefully for now, that has answered any questions you might have about Tropical Depression number 9 and Humberto. All right, stay safe, everyone.